Hello, this is the third module of Ohio EPA's Public Outreach for the Maumee Watershed Nutrient Total Maximum Daily Load, or TMDL project. I'm Tiffany Kavalak, the Division of Surface Water Chief at Ohio EPA. Today, Ohio EPA staff and sister agencies, along with environmental staff from Indiana and Michigan, and university spokesmen, have come together to provide an overview of the plethora of work occurring in tandem with the TMDL document development. The state of Ohio continues to commit nutrient reduction efforts with investments and coordination throughout the basin, and this overview will provide our stakeholders with the current status of these efforts. And as a reminder, all of the information Ohio EPA is developing for this TMDL can be found on our Maumee Watershed Nutrient TMDL website. This website will continue to be updated regularly throughout the development and implementation of this project. As presented in Module 2, the schedule for releasing the draft TMDL is planned for late 2022. However, a great deal of work is already underway addressing nutrient reduction. There are several components to nutrient reduction. As mentioned in Module 2, Ohio's Domestic Action Plan focuses on providing tools to local stakeholders to properly plan for nutrient reduction activities, and we'll present more about that planning work in this module. The term implementation is used for actions taken in the field to reduce nutrients. This module will also describe the numerous efforts underway to promote, support, and fund implementation actions. As this slide indicates, all aspects of these actions are actively being researched, and we'll close this presentation with details about many of the ongoing research projects that will inform our future impact on nutrient reduction. We'll start with a discussion of the Domestic Action Plan, which is overseen by the Ohio Lake Erie Commission.
My name is Sandra Kosek-Sills of the Ohio Lake Erie Commission, and I am here today to set some overarching context about Ohio's nutrient reduction implementation actions. The Ohio Domestic Action Plan serves as Ohio's framework for adaptive management of this challenging issue. Governor DeWine's H2 Ohio initiative provides state funding to work toward achieving the goals of the plan. Other sources of funding and programs, including the TMDL process, are part of this broad strategy to address harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie. The Ohio Lake Erie Commission is a state agency tasked to preserve Lake Erie's natural resources, to protect the quality of its waters and ecosystem, and to promote economic development of the region by ensuring the coordination of policies and programs of state government pertaining to water quality, toxic substances, and coastal resource management. The Ohio Lake Erie Commission consists of the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, Chair, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Secretary, and the Departments of Agriculture, Transportation, Health, and Development, with 5 private citizen members appointed by the Governor. Under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, Annex 4, goals have been set to protect Lake Erie. These are the Annex 4 goals as ecosystem objectives: reducing harmful algal blooms in the Western Basin and increasing oxygen in the Central Basin. These objectives have been translated into pounds or metric tons of nutrient loads to be reduced. We are not going to cover the targets in detail here, but they are described in the Ohio Domestic Action Plan 2020, and the development of the targets is described in a report by the Annex 4 subcommittee, which is referenced in the plan document. In Ohio's Domestic Action Plan 2020, we are building on existing actions as well as adding new components that are part of the H2 Ohio initiative. There are 4 key action areas to highlight. The first is establish science-based priorities for agricultural best management practices and state programs to support H2 Ohio efforts, led by the Ohio Department of Agriculture. The second is to enhance the ability of wetland restoration to remove nutrients and focus by ODNR to restore and enhance wetlands for nutrient reduction as part of H2 Ohio. The third is to work with communities to offer H2 Ohio support for home sewage treatment system remediation, led by Ohio EPA with partners. And finally, to integrate the role of watershed planning at the local level for siting projects to reduce nutrients efficiently, including a distribution of the load reduction throughout the Maumee River watershed based on the Ohio EPA nutrient mass balance method. The new resources and focus provided by H2 Ohio should accelerate the progress being made toward achieving the Annex 4 and Ohio Domestic Action Plan goals for nutrient reduction, support achievement of the TMDL, and ultimately result in a healthier Lake Erie. Next, each of our agency partners will describe in more detail their implementation actions under the Ohio Domestic Action Plan that are also actions that will implement the reductions needed for the TMDL. New implementation actions developed under the TMDL will be added to a future iteration of the Ohio Domestic Action Plan.
Hello and welcome. My name is Peter McDonough, and I am a Natural Resources Administrator for the Ohio Department of Agriculture, Division of Soil and Water Conservation. I've been with the ODA since 2017, and in the past few years my work has been focused on our H2 Ohio program and related water quality efforts. In this section, we will be looking at the Ohio Department of Agriculture's ongoing conservation activities in the Maumee watershed. The Department of Agriculture was established in 1846 with a mission to support agriculture, protect consumers, safeguard plants and animals, and conserve natural resources. The ODA has several divisions with ongoing conservation and regulatory activities in the Maumee. As shown in this overview, these are the H2 Ohio Program, Soil and Water Phosphorus Program, the Agricultural Pollution Abatement Program, or APAP, Concentrated Animal Feeding Facility Permitting, and Fertilizer Certification and Licensing. The new biennium budget has secured funding that will allow ODA to continue H2 Ohio practices in the Maumee Basin and to expand the program to 10 additional counties that make up the Western Lake Erie Basin. This will allow us to engage the whole Western Lake Erie Basin in conservation practices to improve water quality. ODA is excited to see the program grow and expand, and enrollment is already underway in the new 10-county project area. As always, many thanks to our local soil and water conservation districts for their excellent work in implementing the H2 Ohio program. H2 Ohio conservation practices are built around 3 areas of focus: nutrient management, erosion management, and water management. Nutrient management focuses on matching nutrient application to soil and crop needs, which reduces unnecessary nutrient applications. Nutrient losses are also reduced through implementation of better application methods and timing. Erosion management encourages practices that reduce erosion on cropland, reducing loss of sediment and sediment-bound nutrients. Water management supports development of structures to regulate the timing and volume of water leaving fields, which reduces nutrient loading to downstream waters. 10 conservation practices were selected through a process of cost-impact analysis to deliver the largest impact at the lowest cost. These practices have a proven record in Ohio and beyond. 7 of the 10 practices were offered for crop year 2021. These 7 practices are soil testing and volunteer nutrient management planning, variable rate application, subsurface phosphorus placement, manure incorporation, conservation crop rotation, overwintering cover crops, and drainage water management. 2021 enrollment in these conservation practices has been excellent across the 14 counties. Nearly 1.1 million acres were enrolled in voluntary nutrient management planning. More than 500,000 acres were enrolled in variable rate application. 300,000 acres were enrolled in subsurface phosphorus placement. Nearly 170,000 acres were enrolled in manure incorporation. Almost 155,000 acres were enrolled in conservation crop rotation. Over 450,000 acres were enrolled in overwintering cover crops, and 685 drainage water management structures have been planned. With crop year 2021 underway in the 14 counties of the Maumee Basin, expansion to 10 additional counties is proposed for 2022. These counties make up the rest of the western Lake Erie Basin, and expanding the program to include them would engage the whole western Lake Erie Basin in conservation practices to improve water quality. There is much more work to be done, but these are significant steps. The ODA would like to give special thanks to our local soil and water conservation districts for their excellent work implementing the H2 Ohio program. More information about the H2 Ohio program can be found at h2.ohio.gov. The Soil and Water Phosphorus Program began in 2018 through Senate Bill 299 directives. Implemented within the Maumee watershed, the purpose of the program was to encourage the establishment of vegetative cover near environmentally sensitive areas and to reduce suspended solids and dissolved contaminants in runoff. The program, which was a precursor to the H2 Ohio program, offered producers incentives to convert cropland to grassy buffer or small grains. The two conservation practices offered were the Working Lands Buffer, of which 5,000 acres are completed and 325 acres are in progress, and the Working Lands Small Grain, of which 39,000 acres are completed and 21,000 acres are in progress. Buffer practices are maintained on eligible cropland for 5 years. The Agricultural Pollution Abatement Program, or APAP, is a statewide program managed by the Division of Soil and Water Conservation. The program protects water quality through investigation and resolution of agricultural pollution events into waters of the state. Ohio Revised Code 939 and Ohio Administrative Code 901.13.1 grant the authority to establish standards for management and conservation practices in farming and animal feed operations. These standards apply to all facilities, not only large permitted operations. Common APAP violations include overflow and discharge from animal manure collection, storage, or treatment facilities, manure-contaminated runoff from feedlots and manure management facilities, pollution from other wastewaters, for example, milk house wastewater or silage leachate, excessive erosion, pollution occurring from the land application of manure, and improper composting of animal mortality. Ohio Senate Bill 150, enacted in 2014, introduced specific restrictions for nutrient applications in the western Lake Erie Basin due to water quality issues in western Lake Erie. There are no special restrictions if nutrients are injected, incorporated within 24 hours, or applied to a growing cover crop. Otherwise, the following restrictions apply. No nitrogen, phosphorus, or manure applied to snow-covered, frozen, or saturated soil. No granular nitrogen or phosphorus applied when local weather forecast is greater than 50% chance of precipitation exceeding 1 inch in a 12-hour period. And no manure applied when local weather forecast is greater than 50% chance of precipitation exceeding 1/2 inch in a 24-hour period. It should be noted that Senate Bill 150 does not affect restrictions currently in place for concentrated animal feeding facilities. The Division of Livestock and Environmental Permitting regulates the construction and operation of Ohio's largest livestock and poultry facilities, referred to as Concentrated Animal Feeding Facilities, or CAFs. The division issues the following permits and certifications. Permit to install. This is required for any newly constructed or expanding livestock facility above the large calf animal unit threshold. These permits ensure specific siting criteria and engineering specifications for proposed manure storage structures to meet minimum state requirements. Permit to operate. This is required for the operation of any livestock facility above the large calf animal unit threshold. These permits ensure CAFs implement best management practices for manure management, including land application, mortality management, insect and rodent control, and emergency response. Certified Livestock Manager. Any individual in Ohio brokering, transporting, or land applying 25 million gallons of liquid manure or 4,500 dry tons of solid manure is required to be a certified livestock manager. Additionally, a major CAF is required to have a CLM on staff. The Division of Livestock and Environmental Permitting works collaboratively with the Division of Soil and Water Conservation Agricultural Pollution Abatement Program. The graph here shows permitted facilities in Ohio and the Maumee Basin. There are a total of 258 facilities in Ohio which are permitted, 72 of which are in the Maumee Basin. The majority are either poultry, swine, or dairy operations. Beef, horse, and turkey make up the remainder. The Division of Plant Health manages agricultural fertilizers, ensuring that they are manufactured according to the law and applied by certified persons. There are three main areas managed by Plant Health. The first is commercial fertilizer licensing. Anyone manufacturing or labeling commercial agricultural fertilizers in Ohio must obtain a license. Licenses are renewed annually, and ODA inspectors verify compliance and product integrity by collecting samples for testing and reviewing tonnage annually. The next is product registration. Individual product registration is required for specialty fertilizers, those for non-agricultural use, as well as agricultural additives. Products that meet the criteria for these are registered accordingly. The third area is fertilizer applicator certification. Agricultural fertilizer certification is required for applicators applying fertilizers other than manure to more than 50 acres. Training is available through OSU Extension, and certification testing is administered at the ODA campus. Certification renewal is every 3 years. This concludes the presentation on the ODA's ongoing conservation activities in the Maumee. For more information, visit agri.ohio.gov.
Hi, I'm Eric Sost from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Today I'd like to share with you the work that the department is doing to address nutrient reduction with the development of wetlands through our H2 Ohio program. ODNR is implementing a natural infrastructure-based approach to improve water quality in Ohio's streams, rivers, and lakes. For us, that means the creation, restoration, and enhancement of wetlands, from the coast of Lake Erie to the headwaters. Restoring wetlands in the right places brings back a functional piece of the landscape to restore water quality. And there are, of course, the co-benefits that come along with this work. In addition to nutrient reduction, expanded recreational opportunity, habitat for rare or endangered species, groundwater recharge, and so on. This map shows the locations of wetlands projects that have been funded by ODNR's H2 Ohio program since late 2019. Several projects are completed at this point in mid-2021, and many are in the design and engineering or construction phases. Our H2 Ohio program addresses water quality issues statewide, but we lean most heavily into the nutrient loading and harmful algae bloom issues in the Maumee River watershed, the other western Lake Erie Basin tributaries, and our inland lakes. Ohio lost nearly 90% of its original wetland acreage through drainage and development, and much of that was concentrated in the footprint of the former Great Black Swamp overlapping the Maumee watershed. In addition to the projects shown on the previous map are 150 additional projects in planning on private lands through an H2 Ohio initiative that provides additional incentive for landowners to enroll in select practices within the Lake Erie Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. Projects have been accepted in 23 out of the 27 Lake Erie-Crept counties, and out of the 150 approved projects, 133 projects will construct 2,423 acres of wetlands, and 17 projects will create 114 acres of wooded riparian buffer. ODNR's H2 Ohio program can only accomplish all of this project implementation with the support of partners such as the Ohio Water Development Authority, who contributed a $5 million boost to our project work in 2020, advancing our Maumee River project work as well as expanding our statewide focus. ODNR's H2 Ohio program has also partnered with the Lake Erie and Aquatic Research Network's Wetland Monitoring Program, an academic consortium of water quality and wetland experts from universities across Ohio. Together, we're creating a program to monitor the effectiveness of our wetland projects at reducing nutrient loading. Site characterizations are underway now at some of our first completed wetland projects. Information gained from this program will enable ODNR to fine-tune our natural infrastructure approach and better understand which wetland designs or types work to maximize nutrient reduction. To date, ODNR's H2 Ohio program has funded 57 wetland projects with $64.5 million in investment. $5 million of that work funds our Water Quality Incentives Program for private lands projects. $4.3 million funds the monitoring work being undertaken by the Wetland Monitoring Team at LEARN. Altogether, these projects consist of 7,000 wetland pool acres that will filter over 100,000 acres of watershed and provide habitat to 90 of Ohio's threatened or endangered species. And we simply couldn't accomplish this work without the expertise and hard work of over 25 nonprofit conservation partners who manage these wetland projects. In the coming years, we will continue our urgent effort to stem nutrient loading in Ohio's rivers and lakes with ODNR's natural infrastructure approach. Thank you for your time today.
Next, we'll discuss the ongoing planning and implementation actions carried out by Ohio EPA.
Hi, I'm Paul Glidhill, one of the technical staff at Ohio EPA's Division of Surface Water, dealing with nutrient runoff. The map you see on this slide is of the Maumee River watershed, divided into HUC 12 management units. Those are the light-colored lines. The HUC 12s that you see colored in are where local stakeholders have developed non-point source implementation strategies, also called 9-element plans. The best things about these plans are that they end up with action projects that take a bite out of the nutrient reduction goal for that particular watershed. Ohio's Domestic Action Plan set far-field total phosphorus reduction goals for all of the HUC 12s in the Maumee River watershed. These goals are based on the hydrology and land use specific to each HUC 12 watershed. This year, we are developing 12 to 14 new plans in the headwater areas of the Maumee using Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding. These plans are critical as they not only list action-oriented projects, but they are also a prerequisite for local stakeholders to receive US EPA 319 and Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding. They will be useful for future state funding opportunities as well. These plans have been used to find particular projects that can be implemented to reduce nutrients running off into the Maumee River. Grass waterways, two-stage ditch restorations, drainage water management, and wetland restoration are all example projects that are often included in these 9-element plans. This slide shows one particular watershed on the Black Creek in Mercer County. This area was a source of sediment and nutrients and has now become stable thanks to a waterway project. This work was part of a $556,000 grant awarded by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. The grant also funded 4 other projects that included a two-stage ditch and wetland restoration, drainage water management, and additional grass waterways, riparian buffer restoration, and an urban stormwater project. Ohio continued to use these newly developed 9-element plans to garner funding for this type of implementation.
Hi, my name is Jason Fife, and I supervise Ohio EPA's stormwater program. Stormwater runoff is often worsened by human activities. It can contain various pollutants, including nutrients from fertilizers, pet and yard waste, and failing home sewage treatment systems. In developed areas, rain and snow melt flow over hard surfaces such as streets, parking lots, and roofs, collecting excess nutrients and pollutants before entering into a storm drain and ultimately to a surface water. Because stormwater flows over these hard surfaces and directly into storm drains, there is no opportunity for soil and plants to filter out any pollutants that may be within the stormwater runoff. Ohio EPA's MS4 program is applicable to public entities. This includes cities, villages, counties, townships, ODOT, public universities that own or operate a storm sewer system and are located within an urbanized area as determined by the most recent census data. So this permitting program is applicable for public entities that are located within the most densely populated areas within the state. To address urban runoff, the MS4 permitting program requires the development and implementation of a local stormwater program. This stormwater program focuses on the following 6 minimum control measures: public education and outreach, which would be a program to inform individuals, businesses, and organizations within the community as to the impact on surface water quality of contaminated stormwater discharges and steps they can do to reduce stormwater contamination. Next, public participation involvement. The permit would require a program to create opportunities for individuals and organizations within the community to participate in the development and implementation of the activities to reduce contamination of stormwater within the community. Third, illicit discharge detection and elimination. This would be a proactive program for the MS4 community to detect and eliminate illicit sanitary cross connections that may be illicitly connected to their storm sewer system, dumping of waste or other non-stormwater discharges that are getting into their storm sewer system. The fourth minimum control measure is the construction site runoff control program. This would be the local program that would require erosion and sediment controls for all sites disturbing 1 or more acres of total land. The permit would require the MS4 community to perform site inspections, plan reviews, and take any enforcement actions where necessary. Post-construction runoff control. This is a program to require the development and implementation and maintenance of any stormwater controls that are installed on these construction sites and to maintain after development to minimize stormwater pollution after the development is complete. Lastly, pollution prevention good housekeeping for municipal operations. This would be a program including an employee training component to minimize pollutants for municipal operations such as garages, salt piles, pesticide and fertilizers that are used for green spaces. The MS4 permitting program does include TMDL performance standards, which incorporate additional implementation requirements for MS4s that are located within approved TMDLs. For example, MS4 is located within TMDL watersheds with nutrients would be required to target their education involvement activities to nutrient issues. Once the Maumee Watershed Nutrient TMDL is finalized, MS4 communities within this watershed may have additional nutrient monitoring and/or reduction responsibilities.
Hello, I'm John Bernstein, Assistant Chief of Ohio EPA's Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance. I help to administer the 2 state revolving fund programs for Ohio EPA, along with the State of Ohio's H2 Ohio program. I'd like to start off by giving you a little bit of information on the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund, or the WPCLF. The WPCLF is Ohio's wastewater state revolving fund program. Every state has an SRF program, and how these programs work is we receive capitalization grants from US EPA, and in turn we issue loans to communities for wastewater infrastructure, predominantly things like wastewater treatment plant improvements, new wastewater treatment plants, or collection systems and collection system improvements. In time, the communities pay us back the loans along with interest that's been generated. This allows us to grow the program, continue to issue loans to meet the demands of communities. The program's been in existence since 1989, so over 32 years. In that time, we've issued over $10 billion in loans to communities all across Ohio. As you can see to the left, the map shows just how far and wide we've been able to provide funds. Some of the larger borrowers in the state have been the City of Columbus, City of Akron, the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, and the City of Toledo. The $10 billion in low-interest loans has provided these communities all across Ohio over $1.5 billion in interest savings. Since 2009, with the advent of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, we've been able to offer what's called principal forgiveness as a part of our program. And how principal forgiveness works, it's technically a loan that doesn't need to be repaid. So we're not allowed to give out grants, but we are allowed to give out loans that don't need to be repaid, which in essence acts as a grant. Typically, our focus areas in recent years have been providing sewers to unsewered areas, regionalizing or consolidating multiple wastewater treatment plants and systems, and also funding for local health districts to complete household sewage treatment system repair and replacement for local citizens. H2 Ohio's Governor DeWine's Water Quality Initiative being administered by the Ohio EPA, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and Ohio Department of Agriculture. Ohio EPA has had a smaller funding role than our partner agencies, but we've had a very local impact and have been very successful in leveraging other grant dollars for our projects. For year one, we administered $3.5 million for 6 water and wastewater projects. These projects targeted small and disadvantaged communities that did not have access to wastewater services and may not have access to safe and clean drinking water. Lead service lines have been a really big focus area in recent years in Ohio and across the country. For year one, we worked with Greater Cincinnati Waterworks to replace lead service lines at Ohio daycare facilities. We're coordinating the funding with the Ohio Department of Health, who received a federal grant to perform water quality testing at these same daycare facilities. We provided $1.75 million in year one to 7 local health districts in the Western Basin to repair, replace, or connect failing septic systems to existing sewer systems. This program has been modeled on a successful program we've been administering through the WPCLF for the last 6 years. Lastly, a focus area we've been working on is increased monitoring and data collection. We've worked with our partners at USGS and others to install an additional 20 rain gauges to improve weather forecasting and modeling in Northwest Ohio. This map gives you a sense of where Ohio EPA provided funding in year one of H2 Ohio. The blue counties are those counties whose health districts received $250,000 in H2 Ohio grant funding to assist low-income homeowners in repairing and replacing their septic systems. Homeowners are eligible for between 50% and 100% grant funds to accomplish this repair and replacement. The 6 communities highlighted with the red stars received a total of $3.5 million for critical wastewater and drinking water projects. Most of these projects also received principal forgiveness loan funding from the Ohio EPA. Principal forgiveness loans act as grants as they are loans that don't need to be repaid. In years 1 and 2 of H2 Ohio, Ohio EPA worked with the Greater Cincinnati Waterworks and Cleveland Water to address lead service line replacement at child daycare centers. Sometimes a connection between a water main and a home or business is a service line containing lead. This lead can leach out into the water supply and affect sensitive populations such as children. It's expected that these funds will be able to replace hundreds of lead service lines at daycare centers in the 2 cities. In year 2 of H2 Ohio, Ohio EPA provided grant funds to over a dozen communities across the state. These grants range in size from $25,000 to the city of Findlay for a wastewater collection system design project to up to $1.5 million to the city of Canton to construct a drinking water project to serve over 200 households. Many of these projects address critical needs in small and disadvantaged communities. In year 2 of H2 Ohio, Ohio EPA provided grant funds to 11 health districts to repair and replace septic systems for low-income homeowners. These 11 health districts each received $150,000 in H2 Ohio funds. For years 3 and 4 of H2 Ohio, which correspond with state fiscal years 2022 and 2023, Ohio EPA has $10 million per year to continue working on our focus areas to replace failing septic systems, provide water and wastewater infrastructure for small and disadvantaged communities, and replace lead service lines at daycares and other locations.
Next, we'll review implementation being carried out by the Ohio Department of Health. Rachel Townsend, the Residential Water and Sewage Program Manager, will now explain their efforts.
The Clean Watershed Survey asked all of the local health districts to report on the existing household sewage treatment systems in their jurisdiction. Here are the results for Northwest Ohio from the 2012 survey. In 2012, 41% of the discharging systems in Northwest Ohio were reported to be failing by their local health departments. With a failing discharging system, the impact to the environment and possibly public health is immediate because there is not a buffer like we might have with a soil-based system. January 1st, 2015, the sewage treatment system rules became effective. These rules establish the requirement that all local health districts have to implement an operation and maintenance tracking program. Every system put under permit from January 1, 2015 has to be enrolled. Additionally, every discharging system installed after January 1, 2007 has to be enrolled. The Operation and Maintenance Tracking Program requires the local health districts to ensure that systems are being maintained in good working order and educating the system owner about what those requirements are for their system. But what about all the soil-based systems in the ground before January 1st of 2015? And what about all of the discharging systems that were installed before January 1st of 2007? The rules also require that local health districts work with interested stakeholders to develop a timeline and a plan to enroll those existing systems into their local O&M tracking program. Often the first step a local health district must perform is an inventory of existing systems to determine what type of system is installed at a location. This will allow them to provide the owner with the required maintenance activities specific to their system type. The system-specific operation permit should identify the maintenance activities that the owner will need to demonstrate have been performed. If the system includes a pretreatment component or discharges, the product manufacturer has product-specific service checklists that the registered service provider will fill out when service is performed. The status of other components, like pumps, tanks, soil absorption areas, etc., will be visually inspected and written documentation of their status provided. If the system type is required to be sampled, those results must be provided. When the tank or tanks, if you have more than one, are pumped, the registered septage hauler provides the system owner a copy of the pumping report which documents the status of the tank and the volume removed. Contact information for the Sewage Treatment Systems Program at the Ohio Department of Health is as follows. You can reach us by phone at 614-644-7551 or email us at beh@odh.ohio.gov.
I'm Lynn Garrity. I'm with the Ohio Lake Erie Commission. I'm going to provide an overview of watershed restoration through Ohio's Areas of Concern. Ohio's Area of Concern program addresses the 4 areas of concern that were identified in Ohio under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement under its Annex 1 as degraded areas for biological and ecological conditions caused by human activities. The program in Ohio is administered by Ohio Lake Erie Commission in partnership with Ohio EPA to identify projects and actions to remove the impairments that exist within the areas of concern boundaries and its specific program criteria. It is a partnership program with local advisory committees, federal and state agencies, and other regional and community organizations and individuals. One of those areas of concern is the Maumee Area of Concern. The Maumee Area of Concern consists of the lower 23 miles of the main stem of the Maumee River and includes 11 tributary watersheds, of which all except one directly flow to Lake Erie. The Maumee Area of Concern boundary is outlined in red on the map of this slide. The Maumee Area of Concern boundary consists of 787 square miles of the total Maumee River watershed that consists of 8,316 square miles. The Maumee River watershed boundary is outlined in dark green on the map of this slide. The Maumee Area of Concern has identified 10 of the 14 beneficial uses as impaired within its boundary. Targets, a plan, and projects have been identified to address those impairments. The Maumee Area of Concern projects can also contribute to nutrient reduction. These activities include sampling and data collection to identify conditions specific to the area of concern beneficial use impairments. Non-point source implementation strategy plans have been developed to include projects within the area of concern that will complement the area of concern efforts with nutrient reduction and improved ecological conditions. And lastly, projects have been identified to improve the lower Maumee River watershed that includes projects for wildlife and fish habitat restoration and protection, These are 17 projects that have been identified for implementation, and contaminated sediment remediation in 3 areas.
The Maumee watershed extends to portions of Indiana and Michigan. Sam Innett from the Indiana Department of Environmental Management will begin by explaining their efforts to address nutrients from their portion of the Maumee.
Indiana's portion of the Maumee River Basin hosts one of the major confluences of the Maumee River and the headwaters of the Maumee River. The confluence is formed by the St. Joseph River, which flows southwest from its headwaters in southern Michigan, and the St. Mary's River, which flows northwest from its headwaters in western Ohio. The 2 rivers meet in downtown Fort Wayne to form the Maumee River that then flows northeast into Ohio. The Auglaize River Basin forms the smallest part of the Maumee River Basin in Indiana. Each watershed in Indiana's portion of the Western Lake Erie Basin has active funding from state or federal sources for water quality improvements. The water quality improvement actions taken in the Maumee River Basin are coordinated by approved watershed management plans and other planning structures and acted upon by municipal, county, and state governments, as well as non-governmental organizations and industry partners. The following slides describe the ongoing efforts in Indiana to reduce phosphorus loadings to Lake Erie. Western Lake Erie Basin Domestic Action Plan Advisory Committee members and partners have created a multi-jurisdictional monitoring network across Indiana's portion of the Maumee watershed. The monitoring network is built with USGS stream gauges, state and federal auto samplers, as well as in-person sampling conducted by state and local groups. Advanced monitoring networks help target management practices to the watersheds that contribute the most to the water quality concerns in the Maumee Basin. The current critical watersheds are shown in the map ranging from green to red. The majority of the critical areas are located in the St. Mary's River watershed. The next focus area for the advisory committee are urban point sources. There are 4 major National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES, permitted facilities in Indiana's portion of the Maumee River Basin. There are also 8 permitted municipal wastewater treatment plants, each with a total phosphorus effluent limit of 1 milligram per liter. These treatment plants are located in Fort Wayne, Decatur, Auburn, and Butler. These wastewater treatment plants average a discharge concentration below the 1 milligram per liter total phosphorus limit. There are also 3 minor municipal wastewater treatment plants and an additional 7 industrial or other minor dischargers. Within the developed area, there are 7 combined sewer overflow communities, including Auburn, Berne, Butler, Decatur, Fort Wayne, New Haven, and Waterloo. Each of these communities has either a long-term control plan or a consent decree with compliance schedules. Lastly, there are 13 designated municipal separate storm sewer systems, 10 of whom have an approved stormwater quality management plan, including 1 in Adams County, 11 in Allen County, and 1 in DeKalb County. Municipal, county, and state regulatory personnel work to ensure point sources of pollution are in compliance with their permits. Ongoing urban non-point source pollution reduction projects conducted by advisory committee members include work being done by the community organization Save Maumee, which organizes tree plantings in riparian areas, among other activities. Steuben County Soil and Water Conservation District also has a grant specifically targeted to urban practices located within a half-mile of a river, lake, or perennial stream. Multiple completed and ongoing projects across Indiana's portion of the Maumee watershed address rural non-point source pollution. Some examples of projects include 319 grant-funded projects in the St. Joseph and St. Mary's watersheds, a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant in the Upper Maumee watershed, and a 205J planning grant in the Auglaize watershed. There are also several regional programs promoting responsible nutrient application, improving soil health, and conservation farming, like the 4R Nutrient Stewardship Program, the In-Field Advantage Program, and the Soil Health Partnership Program. One of the flagship accomplishments for the rural non-point source pollution reduction initiatives are the recently completed emergency community manure storage lagoons located in Adams County. Indiana's Domestic Action Plan supports multiple education and outreach efforts run by the partner organizations. The advisory committee maintains the Western Lake Erie Basin Story Map that contains information and resources for Maumee Basin residents. County health departments conduct education and outreach on septic system design and repair requirements. The Indiana Conservation Partnership, or ICP, provides technical and education assistance to implement land and water stewardship decisions. The ICP also produces the Tillage Transect, which is an annual statewide survey of tillage practices and cover crop applications. Additionally, local municipalities conduct stormwater education and outreach, and each county soil and water conservation district supports education programs of their own. Lastly, state-run grant programs like 319 and 205J, as well as the Clean Water Indiana, also support education and outreach within their project areas. The last goal of Indiana's Domestic Action Plan is to enhance nutrient management, promote soil health practices, and restore more natural hydrology and ecological functions to the Maumee Basin watersheds by promoting drainage water management and emphasizing the importance of allowing water to infiltrate where it falls. The Maumee River Basin Commission is an advisory committee member that works to mitigate flood damage in the region. Current projects include purchasing property with a history of flooding in order to restore the floodplain and conducting planning efforts in the St. Mary's and St. Joseph rivers to assess water quality impacts and flood risks associated with changing land use and urbanization. The St. Mary's River Assessment was completed in 2019, and the St. Joseph River Assessment is currently underway.
Hello, my name is Michelle Salzer, and I'm with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. I will be presenting an update on the development of Michigan's Adaptive Management Plan that is currently being finalized. I am presenting on behalf of the State of Michigan's Domestic Action Plan team, which is a senior management working group of the Quality of Life departments of Eagle, Agriculture and Rural Development, and Natural Resources. This presentation is a brief overview of the draft Adaptive Management Planning Framework, currently in development to support Michigan's efforts to reduce phosphorus in Michigan's portion of the Lake Erie Basin. And it will cover some of the key elements of that process. Tackling a complex issue like nutrient management at a basin scale is not a simple nor straightforward undertaking, as this is as much of a human dimensions challenge as it is an environmental challenge. The DAP team feels the better solutions will be found through active adaptive management moving forward. In 2018, Michigan released the Domestic Action Plan, which outlined phosphorus nutrient reduction management actions that would be taken to achieve the aspirational goal of a 20% phosphorus reduction by 2020 and a 40% reduction by 2025. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement called for using an adaptive management approach to address the Lake Erie phosphorus challenge. Michigan is using the 6-step adaptive management process developed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a starting point and is outlined here. The DAP team is just beginning to explore using this more formal approach. It has been an opportunity for the DAP team to learn about adaptive management process itself and transition our collective work from a passive to a more active management effort. This more formal process will help capture agency and partner commitments through a 2-year work planning process and help the agencies establish a more strategic method to better guide management decisions, on-the-ground actions, and policy development opportunities. Specifically, Michigan's Adaptive Management Framework will align resources and research needs and will work in 2 ways. First, to evaluate the outcomes of deliberate, measured actions taken to reduce phosphorus. And second, implement projects to address knowledge gaps and uncertainties in our current approaches to reducing phosphorus delivery to Lake Erie. As agreed to under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement Annex 4 process, Michigan set both point source and non-point source load reduction targets for total phosphorus only. The DAP called for point source reductions from 4 key wastewater treatment facilities that contribute over 90% of the point source load. Those reduced phosphorus limits are in place, and work at the Great Lakes Water Authority plant in Detroit has helped Michigan meet our aspirational goal of 20% phosphorus reduction by 2020.
Monitoring in the River Raisin, however, has not shown improved water quality to date. Historic efforts to implement non-point source BMPs have not yet been successful at helping us achieve our 40% reduction goal. Therefore, the state is looking to focus on HUC 12 subwatersheds and field-scaled non-point source management actions in 3 key watersheds: the River Raisin watershed, Bean Creek watershed, and the St. Joseph River watershed, specifically focusing on implementing BMPs in the right places on the landscape. Next, I will give a quick overview of one of the key management tactics that is currently being implemented that shows great potential to help focus our work and meet the non-point source challenge. Since early last year, the state has been working with the Environmental Working Group organization with funding from the Herb Family Foundation to plan and implement agriculture inventories in 13 priority subwatersheds in the Bean Creek watershed, the River Raisin watershed, and in the SS LaPointe direct drainage watershed. The agriculture inventory process is a field-scale approach to conservation that has 3 components. The first component is a modeling effort that looks at water flow paths, field slopes, and potential locations where BMPs can be placed to address known resource concerns. The GIS-based desktop analysis component determines field boundaries, identifies fields within 50 and 300 feet of water bodies, identifies fields with and without filter strips, fields with potential CAFO manure application, and other livestock operations that are not currently regulated. The field-by-field component inventories the current cropping systems on the fields and identifies fields where BMPs are already being implemented. When taken together, this information is being used to prioritize sites that have the greatest potential to address water quality impacts and will be used by Conservation District staff and MEEP technicians to help engage landowners on opportunities to implement specific BMPs. This graphic shows the Michigan's Western Lake Erie Basin 13 priority ag inventory subwatersheds highlighted in light blue, including those subwatersheds that have been completed. Those are shown in the green highlighted area, and the subwatersheds where the ag inventory effort is in progress. Those are shown in dark blue. The hatched subwatersheds are where newer USGS monitoring gauge stations have been installed. Ultimately, our goal is to use this ag inventory process throughout Michigan's entire Western Lake Erie Basin to further focus conservation in the right places. Specifically, the following BMPs are ranked in the order of importance and will serve as the foundation for the non-point source reduction implementation strategy for Michigan's priority watersheds. They include improved nutrient management with 4R practices, increasing acreage of cover crops, no-till and reduced tillage, increasing the miles of riparian buffers or filter strips along critical water bodies, including drains, expanding the use of water quantity management BMPs, developing whole farm conservation system plans, and where possible, promote wetland protection and restoration to reduce nutrient loads from ag sources. Another important effort was to conduct an expert and stakeholder engagement process. In addition to taking public comment, hosting webinars, and one-on-one stakeholder engagement, Erica Washburn with Washburn Environmental Solutions served as a neutral party and interviewed the 11 DAP team members, and over 20 outside experts engaged directly on the nutrient issue, as well as human dimensions experts and other researchers in the Great Lakes region. The purpose of this component of the process was to assist the DAP team with exploring concerns, ideas, challenges, and opportunities for implementing an effective stakeholder advisory process. Here are some of the highlights of what we heard. In terms of overall coordination of efforts in the region, we need to continue to strengthen our internal collaborations across the departments and with stakeholder groups actively working in the Western Lake Erie Basin. When asked about existing engaged cross-sector network in the Western Lake Erie Basin, what that currently looks like, we heard that we need to give thought to a new, diverse, science-based Western Lake Erie Stakeholder Advisory Group. and that we need to keep the engagement structures simple and a mix of both one-on-one consultation and group time to allow for social bonds and trust to form. When asked about what needs to be considered when looking at incorporating social indicator research and development into this process, we heard that we need to, at minimum, develop social indicators to track producer and public perceptions, as well as understanding of the nutrient issue. An important part of the adaptive management process is to conduct research to address uncertainties or gaps in our knowledge. There are multiple sources of uncertainty that apply to the adaptive management process of this magnitude, including inadequate scientific understanding of phosphorus cycling, BMP effectiveness, and climate change impacts. One important research effort Michigan will be undertaking by our EGLES non-point source program is looking at soil test phosphorus levels and manure application rates in the state. This was a common question we received during the public comment period on the draft plan last spring. Current guidelines for determining manure application rates to fields is based on the soil test phosphorus levels in the field and the amount of phosphorus in the manure. The current 75 to 150 parts per million soil test phosphorus levels are applied to all soil types across the state. However, it is known that certain soils can bind less phosphorus and therefore make phosphorus more susceptible to being lost and potentially impacting water quality. Also, it is not known if the current standard took into consideration soluble phosphorus and phosphorus discharges from tile lines. The state will be conducting a literature review to research what limits other states and Canada use for soil phosphorus limits. If the literature search shows that Michigan's standards are not protective of water quality, the results of this research will be used to establish standards that are more protective of water quality. For next steps, the DAP team will finalize the adaptive management plan and continue to apply the adaptive management framework to the work that the agencies are planning and implementing. An important next step will be to form the Western Lake Erie Science-Based Stakeholder Advisory Group that will provide key input and feedback into the adaptive management process moving forward. The DAP team is just beginning to take next steps and develop a 2-year work plan that will focus on efforts to accelerate conservation in the right places in the key priority watersheds of Michigan's Western Lake Erie Basin. We cannot do this work alone. Ultimately, success will depend on the agricultural community's ability and willingness to implement the priority BMPs in Michigan's portion of the Western Lake Erie Basin. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or any of the DAP team members listed here.
Hello, my name is Dr. Chris Winslow, and I'm Director of Ohio Sea Grant and Ohio State University Stone Laboratory. Today's PowerPoint is a research update. I'll basically give insight into the status of Lake Erie algae and nutrient source reduction efforts. Regarding logos, Ohio Sea Grant is a NOAA-funded entity. Our logo on the left here. Sea Grant is one of 34 programs. Any state that bumps into the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Gulf, or a Great Lake has a Sea Grant program. So again, we're one of 34. But in my role, not only Director of Sea Grant, but I get to have the pleasure of helping Stone Laboratory, which is an OSU-owned island. And Sea Grant is also based at The Ohio State University. The logo to the right, clearly the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency. The Ohio EPA has played a critical role in a lot of these research projects, specifically helping us set priorities and identifying research gaps. But they have asked me to pull this presentation together today. So what we're going to do is just talk about kind of the research that's going on right now, so the implementation of these efforts. Introductory slide, basically there are a ton of academic studies occurring in the Maumee watershed and throughout Ohio that are focused on BMPs, or best management practices, and nutrient removal treatment effectiveness. So what practices can we deploy on the landscape that give us the biggest bang for our buck under certain conditions? So not all practices are equally effective at holding or drawing down nutrients on different locations. So that work is going on. I'll give some detail about that effort in some upcoming slides. We're also doing a lot of work for nutrient movement throughout the watershed. So what is the fate and transport of nutrients that make it into the system? The picture in the top right is really focused on rivers. So what nutrients, what do they do when they get into rivers? Do the rivers actually absorb some of the nutrients, or do they contribute additional nutrients? So it's that fate and transport of nutrients throughout the watershed. This ties cleanly with the next bullet, which is nutrient monitoring throughout the watersheds. So basically, where do we need sensors? Where do we need to be collecting samples so that we can determine where the bulk of these nutrients are coming from and what is the timing of their introduction into the system or movement into the system? And then also some work on the nature of harmful algal blooms in general. So when do they appear? What are their genetics? When they are present, when do they start producing toxins? When do they stop producing toxins? The two pictures on the bottom I should highlight too. This ties into the best management practices. So the one on the left is really looking at better ways to apply manure, a key nutrient for Ohio, and something that is important to be utilizing. We're just trying to find ways to effectively apply it so that it stays where it's applied and is taken up by the crop. And then the picture on the right is basically one of the ways we measure the efficacy of these best management practices. So it's a flume. So this location is basically to measure the water coming off of this field, either through the surface or the tile, and it'll measure when the nutrients are coming off in the season, but it'll also measure when a best management practice is deployed on this field. How can you track or score that reduction in nutrients post-rain? So I must start off by highlighting the Harmful Algal Bloom Research Initiative. So this is funding that's supported through the Ohio Department of Higher Education, the logo here in the top or in the middle to the right. This funding has been in place since 2015, the year after the Toledo water consumption advisory went into place. This funding source that basically puts out requests for research proposals and funds these research projects is co-administered by Ohio Sea Grant, again based at The Ohio State University and the University of Toledo. To date, $10 million in funding has moved through this process, the Harmful Algal Bloom Research Initiative. Approximately 70 projects have been funded, again from FY15 through FY19. I will highlight a subset of those for you today. Currently, we're competing $4 million, so we've lumped both FY20 and 21 funds and are currently competing projects that will be utilizing this support. So again, the logo is Sea Grant, Ohio State, and the University of Toledo. This research under the Harmful Algal Bloom Research Initiative is absolutely collaborative. You'll see that we've had interaction and engagement with federal agencies. On the right are state agencies. All the priorities that are put out to the academic institutions to guide research projects come from the DNR, Ag, Health, and EPA. So the projects are meeting priorities identified by these state agencies. We've had great involvement from our NGOs in the state and also the agribusinesses and the Farm Bureau. All the universities at the bottom of this slide are universities that have received funding to do some of the work under this Harmful Algal Bloom Research Initiative. So what you're going to see is a couple of slides that look very similar to this. So it'll say 2020 ODHE projects. So these are the HABRI projects. Even though the year they're occurring is 2020, the funding typically comes the year before. So these are going to be FY19 funded projects that occurred in 2020. First one is work done by Dr. Justin Chaffin out of OSU, really looking at the trends of saxitoxin producing bacteria. So mostly we hear of harmful algal blooms that produce microcystin. So they're microcystis that produce microcystin. This work is now we have detected that there's a second toxin produced by these cyanobacteria that's called saxitoxin. And so this work's really trying to figure out when these show up and where these toxins show up. Work by Jim Hood out of OSU is looking at that river question. So what is the impact of rivers on phosphorus? Are they drawing it down and absorbing it, or are they releasing more? Early research there suggests that for the bulk of the time they are phosphorus sinks. So they're actually helping to draw down some of those nutrients. Work out of OSU is going on to look at remote sensing and water quality data. So they're looking at data that's already in hand or data that's being collected in the field to basically enhance that ability to use satellites to monitor the appearance and the location of these blooms in inland lakes. We have great satellite data to do Lake Erie proper, but the inland lakes are a little bit different story. Work out of Cutright from Akron basically looking at how do we work with reservoirs and drinking water facilities to remove cyanotoxins. Basically, she's doing a lot of work with saxitoxin and anatoxin, not only microcystin. And a lot of this is the application of algicides, so basically chemicals that will tamp down these blooms that produce these toxins. Early work from that is showing that each reservoir and each facility needs a different recipe on what of these algicides to ask, and depending on what toxins are there. Dr. Gangming Liu at BGSU is looking at the fate of these toxins through the surface of the ground. So if we have microcystins that are applied to land surfaces, how do they move through the soil and potentially into groundwater? Dr. April Ames at the University of Toledo is assessing the risk of microcystin inhalation. So how many microcystins are in the atmosphere, so that have been aerosolized, and what is that risk to people that live along the shoreline? Continuing with 2020 projects, again, FY19 funding, Dr. Libby Dayton is looking at the leaching of microcystins and the uptake of microcystins into crops, specifically associated with water treatment residuals. So when water is pulled into a treatment facility and it's cleaned for human consumption, a byproduct of that is what are called drinking water or water treatment residuals. Those can, in certain circumstances, be land applied to grow crops on. She's assessing what is the possibility of toxins that are in those residuals being moved into groundwater or into rivers and streams or taken up into the crops. Dr. Stephen Haller out of University of Toledo is looking at the risk of populations along the shoreline to cyanotoxin exposure. So what is the risk to folks that, for example, have pre-existing liver conditions? Dr. Haller's also not only looking at the risk of these at-risk populations, but he's looking for therapies, so novel therapies for people that have been exposed to these microcystins, which again are liver toxins. Dr. Wulu out of OSU looking at microcystins in fish tissue, so he's developing a sensor that allows us in near real time to basically see if the edible flesh that anglers eat off of yellow perch and walleye have toxin levels that they should be concerned with. This research is still ongoing. We don't have any official sensor developed quite yet, but we're on that road. Von Ziegler, Dr. Von Ziegler out of University of Toledo is looking at beach sands. So we do know that if there's microcystin in the water column, as those waves crash on the shore, what happens to those microcystins in that water? Are they filtering through the sand? Are they staying in the sand? And is this a possible exposure route to folks that are on our beaches? Dr. Lyons out of OSU is looking at drain water control structures. So basically, how can we control the movement of water off fields through our drain tiles so that we can keep those nutrients on the field during periods when perhaps they're running off those fields too quickly. So when should we be opening drains? When should we be closing them? And how can we control the movement of water off the landscape? Moving away from the 2020 projects, so these were, again, projects started funding in FY19 and talking about projects that are more towards completion. These are projects started in FY17 and 18, but they were initiated in 2019. One is coming out of Dr. Tim Davis from BGSU. This is looking basically at the environmental drivers of saxitoxin. So again, we're not just concerned right now about microcystin in the water, but we want to know about saxitoxins. And so what he's trying to do is look at what things in the environment trigger the appearance or presence of saxitoxins. So water temperature, water clarity, nutrient concentrations, and so that work is moving along. Dr. Margaret Kalsick out of OSU is looking at how do we simulate the movement of nutrients off of fields that have drain tiles versus those that don't. Some of the early modeling done by this group and many others look at movement of nutrients off of fields that don't have tiles, and so she's incorporating the ability to capture this tile movement. A group out of University of Cincinnati is developing a HabSat. Basically, we have now the ability to launch mini, what are called cube satellites. This effort is to try and get a low orbit satellite out so that perhaps we can do some more monitoring of blooms, their appearance and their origination in inland lakes and again in Lake Erie. Dr. Laura Johnson is the lead at Heidelberg, and she basically leads the Heidelberg Tributary Loading Program, and so she has gotten funds from this effort to basically support those efforts. This tributary monitoring program has been going on since the early 70s to mid 70s, and this funding from the Ohio Department of Higher Education has allowed her to ramp up the number of samples and the number of sites to be collecting nutrient information. Still in 2019 projects, again, FY 17 and 18, Dr. Tom Bridgman is working with a group of scientists to look at what's called HAB impairment criteria. So basically our state EPA needs to communicate with the federal EPA on which water bodies in the state are considered quote unquote impaired. This group is working with the Ohio EPA to find an impairment criteria or a threshold for when they can assess whether the open waters of the western basin of Lake Erie are impaired for recreation. And so that information has been turned over to the Ohio EPA, and they are working with the federal EPA to basically codify that impairment criteria. Dr. Harold Keener out of OSU is looking at on-farm manure management practices. So basically, how do we handle manure so that less phosphorus leaves that manure and runs into receiving water bodies? The early evidence from this work is showing that we need to store that manure for 90 days before taking the liquid or even the solid portion and applying it to the field. So less phosphorus is available for runoff if we can store that manure for 90 plus days. Dr. Savitka Rai with University of Toledo is mapping where BMPs are happening on the landscape by driving by and a little bit of satellite work, but she's also surveying the farmers as she's looking for application of best management practices to see what are the barriers to farmers deploying some of these best management or BMP practices. The last one on this slide is Dr. Patrick Lawrence from University of Toledo. He's looking at a distribution model of manure, so actually trying to assess where these animal operations are and what ability do they have to transport that manure, which can be expensive, to places where perhaps they can be applying it to fields that need that nutrients. And maybe opposition to those that are close to those operations as they exist already. So trying to help farmers figure out where they could move that manure where it would be needed, but also lower cost to those producers. Still some more FY19 projects. Dr. Bob Midden is looking at how he can spin manure down or treat manure such that the water is removed and only the solids are retained, so it makes it easier to transport these nutrients, but also developing a way to deploy them where they are slow release fertilizers, so that they are released from the polymer that they're attached to, so that they're available when the crop is ready to utilize them. Dr. Wulu, again, this is another biosensor that he's using, but this isn't for fish tissue. This is for detection of those cyanotoxins in just straight water. So can we take a water sample, which normally takes us 4 to 6 hours to analyze for toxins, and find those toxins in a shorter period of time, 15 minutes to a half an hour. Dr. Nick Basta, also with OSU, is looking at the fate and persistence of these microsystems and treatment residuals. So as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Libby Dayton is looking at the movement of those into the groundwater or into crops. Nick Basta set the ground for those 2020 projects by looking at the presence of these toxins in those residuals. He was the first to detect, him and his team, the first to detect them. Dr. Mike McKay, formerly of BGSU, now at the University of Windsor, is looking at viral activity. So basically, instead of measuring the toxins alone to inform water treatment plants that these blooms are coming, but can we see an uptick in aquatic viruses that are associated with toxin production? So giving an early indicator for water treatment plants that these potentially toxin-laden waters are coming into their plants. Some other projects in this 2019 push. One is working with Dr. John Linhart at OSU. He's working with powder activated carbon, so PAC, P-A-C, for saxitoxin. He's done some great work to show how much carbon you need to add in the treatment process to remove microcystins, but now he's fine-tuning that formula to also remove saxitoxins. Dr. Jason Huntley with the University of Toledo is looking at biofilters, so water biofilters. So can we put filters in our home facilities, or also deploy these into water treatment facilities so that they can remove the toxins? The at-home use would be great, because if the toxins got through some of our drinking water facilities, you would have a backup system within your home. Dr. Wulu, again, sensor detection, but this is not fish flesh, this is not water, but he's also trying to detect microcystins in biological samples, so meaning blood and urine. And then Dr. April Ames is looking at what are the airborne microcystin concentrations, so what are the possible health effects associated with recreational users of Lake Erie. The last one we have here is, again, 2019 projects funded in 17 and 18. Dr. Noblo with OSU is looking at liver cancer biomarkers to see if we can find out if the chronic and acute exposure to microcystins can actually trigger cancer in liver. Dr. Kennedy with University of Toledo is looking for therapies to help folks that have pre-existing liver disease. So how are we going to help these folks that are exposed to this toxicity that have liver disease? Same line, Dr. Kennedy and Dr. Haller at University of Toledo work very closely together. They're also looking at a population of folks that have inflammatory bowel disease. So how does microcystin toxicity affect these folks perhaps disproportionately to folks that do not have this disease? And the last one is Dr. Stu Ludson at Ohio State University. He really looks at the behavior, growth, and survival of yellow perch and walleye that are found in these toxic blooms. So we've looked at, do they store that toxin in their fish flesh for human consumption, but we need to know, are they changing their behavior, their growth, and their survival? So those are the projects under ODHE. Again, those initiated in 19 and 20 and funded under FY 17 through 19. I do want to talk about some other relevant research efforts with the time I have with you today. The one I want to highlight first is LEARN. The logo is here to the right. It stands for Lake Erie and Aquatic Research Network. And this is basically a collaboration or a network of universities across Ohio that are trying to study water quality issues. Specifically for this slide, LEARN has partnered up with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, ODNR, and helping them out with the H2 Ohio wetland monitoring effort. So under Governor DeWine's H2 Ohio initiative, some of that funding through the ODNR is going to create wetlands. This group is really looking at the research to determine or assess whether these newly created wetlands are effectively drawing down nutrients from the system. I do want to mention that Ohio Sea Grant not only manages or co-manages the Ohio Department of Higher Education funds, but we also administer NOAA Sea Grant dollars. And so these grants are also addressing some of these HABs and toxicity issues. And the other effort that I wanted to mention going on is multiple universities in Ohio have paired up with the Ohio EPA to look at more impairment criteria. One of the projects was mentioned earlier to look at, can we help the EPA determine when Lake Erie has a impairment criteria for HABs and recreation? But we're now also looking at aquatic life uses. So what other organisms or what other attributes of the water should we be measuring so that we can determine whether the lake is at a condition that the EPA is supposed to assess. Last but not least, I want to mention these other groups that are out here. So it's, again, not just ODHE and it's not just NOAA Sea Grant, but the Ohio Water Resource Center is actively funding research efforts. That's the logo on the bottom right. The Ohio Water Resource Center is a USGS-funded entity. It's based at Ohio State University, as is the Sea Grant program. This is led by Dr. Linda Weavers and Dr. John Lenhart. A lot of projects that come out of this effort are water treatment and kind of engineering projects, typically. Not always, but typically. EcoHab is something that needs a mention. This is a grant through NOAA. This grant is led by OSU Stone Lab, but it's in collaboration with the University of Toledo, Bowling Green, Wright State, others. And this is used to help forecast toxicity of the blooms. NOAA right now has an amazing forecast tool to basically show us how big a bloom might be in a given year. But this group is trying to figure out, can we not only talk about how big the bloom is, but likely how toxic it might be. I'm out of BGSU, and it's a multi-university and agency collaboration, is the NIH NSF-funded Great Lakes Center for Freshwater and Human Health. This group is really trying to get all the active agencies and universities on Lake Erie to really make sure we're standardizing the way we look at toxins and the way we measure bloom presence, the way we look at the genetics of these blooms. Two other funds I want to mention on the last two bullets. The Lake Erie Protection Fund is administered by the Ohio Lake Erie Commission. This group has historically funded a lot of great projects to address HABs in the lake, but also another focus of theirs has been how do we handle dredge material coming out of the 8 navigable channels. The last one here is the Ohio Water Development Authority. They have a research and development program, again, using those funds, the logo here I'm highlighting now, using these funds to, again, highlight water research. So I encourage you, if you want to know about these two funds, the Lake Erie Protection Fund and the Research and Development Fund, to contact the Commission and the Water Development Authority.
As you can see from today's presentations, planning for and implementing nutrient reduction efforts are comprehensive and ongoing. The research of these efforts is also extensive and will continually feed into informing what investments should occur, and where they should take place. This concludes the third module, providing early outreach for Ohio's Mommy Nutrient TMDL. Thank you for your interest in this project and have a great day.